Good morning, readers. Well, today is release day for Sleepwalker's Sanctuary. This is book number 19 in the Reg Rawlins Psychic Investigator series, and it's got some very interesting twists and turns, and one very surprising and exciting thing happens in this book as well. So you are not going to want to miss it, and try not to spoil it for other readers in your reviews as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to read the first little part of Sleepwalker's Sanctuary for you. Reg listened to the voices. They started as whispers in her head, like the other voices that were always there. There was always a background murmur. Sometimes she could pick out the individual voices or feelings, and other times she could not. When she was doing a seance, the group consciousness and intention would help her to zero in on one voice, hopefully the voice that her client wanted to hear, but there was no guarantee of that. Reg gathered her red box braids in both hands and swept them back over her shoulders so they all fell behind her. She smoothed her colorful gypsy skirt and tried to sort out the voices. Some of the voices were harder to ignore or suppress than others. Her mother's voice was one that had always been foremost in her mind, the hardest to silence. Her mother, Norma Jean, had died when Reg was a child, but the voice had never left. Then things happened, and even though Weston had changed the timeline so that Norma Jean had not died, Reg could still hear the living woman's voice in her head, and not only Norma Jean's, but lately all of the other siren voices as well. They were loud and discordant. It seemed like it was never just one of them speaking to her at a time. There had to be a whole Greek chorus wailing and calling to her. One might think that sleep at least would be a blessed release from the voices, but one would be wrong. The voices were just as loud at night, sometimes even louder and more intrusive than during the day. As Reg tried to relax and release all the day's worries and put them aside for a peaceful night's sleep, the voices got louder and clearer. The shrieks, chants, and songs were overwhelming sometimes. In her dream, it had started out as the shrieking, discordant voices that she had become accustomed to, irritating and difficult to block, but the same old that she didn't feel like she had to listen to. If she could focus on other things, maybe play some YouTube videos on her phone to distract herself, they would become less intrusive. But this time it was different. The voices gathered and grew stronger and clearer, rather than individuals trying to wail over each other or the chorus chanting a warning together in different notes or melodies. The voices joined, the melodies synced up and harmonized instead of being discordant. In the old Greek stories, the siren song was always alluring, enchanting, hauntingly beautiful. Reg had just assumed that those accounts were romanticized, since in her experience the siren voices were loud, dissonant, and irritating. The reason that the sailors went crazy and jumped into the water was clearly not because they were attracted to the unbelievably beautiful voices, but because they were driven mad by it and had to find some way to make it stop. Without wax in their ears or being bound to a mast, the only solution available was to drown themselves. But in her dream, the voices changed from their horrible, screeching, nails on the blackboard collective shriek into something beautiful. They morphed into a song unlike anything she'd ever heard, so beautiful that it hurt her chest and brought tears to her eyes. She stopped and stood there, listening to the angelic voices, marveling that she'd never heard them sing together like that before. But the meaning of the song was beyond her grasp. She usually heard English when they spoke in her mind, even though she knew they were scattered all over the world and probably each spoke a different language or some form of ancient Greek they could all understand. Reg listened to the song, harmonious, rhythmic, achingly beautiful. She felt a vibration in her own vocal cords, a humming coupled with a desire to raise her voice with them. Reg had never enjoyed singing or been good at it. When music was a required subject in school, she had mostly mouthed the words, lip-syncing her way through the songs. Her teachers got after her for it until they actually heard her sing, and then they decided she'd better go back to faking it. There were no solos for Reg Rawlins. Reg awoke with a start, torn out of her sleep. Her body was rigid. Something was clearly wrong, but she didn't know what. She opened her eyes and squinted around the room. It was getting light outside, but she wasn't an early morning riser. Dawn was still the middle of the night for her. She couldn't exactly get up at 6 in the morning when she'd been dealing with seances and other client consultations at midnight and the wee hours of the morning. She needed her beauty rest. She looked at the windowsill, expecting to see Starlight, her tuxedo cat, sitting there looking outside like usual. But he wasn't. The windowsill was empty. He must be looking out of the living room window, stalking around the cottage, or having a snack of dry kibble from his bowl. Though lately she wondered if he were somehow getting into the food in the fridge during the night. It seemed like she threw out just as much dry food as she added to the bowl in the first place. She didn't let it sit for too long, knowing it would get stale and Starlight wouldn't eat it then. But did he eat it at all? Starlight, Reg called, and made kissy noises to call him. Star, where are you? Come see me. She listened for kitty footsteps coming toward her, or the snort that meant, Are you kidding? I'm a cat. I have better things to do than to cater to a human being. But she didn't hear anything. The cottage was as quiet as a tomb. Starlight? Reg tried again. He still didn't respond. She closed her eyes, intending to go back to sleep. He was a cat. Cats didn't come when you called, unless you had a can of tuna in your hand. But the silence of the cottage and Starlight's absence concerned her. Starlight usually did come to her when she called him at night. He was as concerned with keeping watch over her and making sure she didn't get into any more trouble than necessary as she was with seeing that he was warm and fed, safe and sound in the cottage, and that his kitty litter box was cleaned reasonably regularly. When Starlight still didn't return to his usual perch on the window, at the window, she sat up and looked around. He'd been poisoned once, cursed by Norma Jean out of jealousy for her daughter's affections. The combination of the siren song and Starlight's absence was too worrying. Reg couldn't go back to sleep until she saw Starlight and confirmed to herself that he was okay. With a groan, Reg rolled over and slid her feet off the bed. She sat on the edge of the mattress for a minute, orienting herself, hoping that Starlight would come strolling in and she could just lie back down and continue with her sleep. But he didn't. Sighing, Reg rose to her feet. She took a quick look around the bedroom, but she knew he would not be there. If he wasn't snoozing on the bed or looking out the window, he didn't have any reason to stay there. Reg yawned and padded out of the bedroom. Her first stop was the bathroom to take care of other concerns, since she knew she wouldn't find him in there. His litter box was in the bathroom, but that was the only reason he'd be in there, or to drink out of the faucet, but that was generally only when she was there to turn it on for him. Reg washed her hands and walked out to the kitchen and living room area. There wasn't any need to check her office, since the door was shut and she rarely used it. It had become more of a dumping ground for things she needed to store and didn't have any other place for. Starlight liked to sneak in there when she opened the door to inspect the boxes and hide behind the various stacks, which was exactly the reason she didn't want him in there and kept the door closed. Starlight? Reg looked around the kitchen and living room and couldn't find him. He wasn't sitting on the back of the couch looking out of the window. He wasn't eating from his bowl or sitting on the counter where he wasn't supposed to be. Reg walked around with increasing concern, looking under pieces of furniture, in dark corners, anywhere Starlight might have decided to hide. Cats hid when they were sick or injured. They pulled away from even the ones they loved and pushed their faces into dark corners, isolating themselves. Where was he? There weren't that many places in the cottage to hide. She couldn't think of anywhere else to check. She returned to the bedroom, turned on the light, and looked around for him. Under the bed, in the closet, under the blankets of the bed, curled up in the dirty clothes that had not quite made it into the hamper, in the hamper itself. There was no sign of him. Reg returned to the bathroom and bent down to look into the cave of his litter box. Not there. She walked back out into the front of the cottage and saw Starlight sitting in the middle of the floor. He sat tall and regal, like a statue of Bastet. So that is from Sleepwalker's Sanctuary. It has launched today, so you can pick up a copy at my e-store, which is shop.pdworkman.com, or at any of the major online retailers, available in ebook or print formats. And check that out today. Hope that you enjoy it. If you're trying to catch up on the Reg Rawlins series, then you could always pick up the combination pack of books 1 through 18 at my e-store, and that will bring you right up to date. If you just want to dip your toes into Reg Rawlins and see what it's all about, then you can pick up the first book in this series, What's the Cat New?